What is going on, guys? It's your boy Where's Fluffy from FOG Networks, and I'm going to be giving you my The Hunger build for the game Dauntless. I'm going to be going over the strengths and weaknesses of this weapon, giving you options to further customize to your own playstyle, and just telling you the ins and outs of how it works and how this build is going to help you maximize your DPS as best as we can. So starting off, the Hunger is one of the 3 legendary weapons in Dauntless, or I like to call them legendary weapons because they're super rare. You don't see a lot of people have them. But the Hunger itself, it has a special ability called Feast, which you take damage over time, but in return, you gain significant lifesteal, attack speed, and etheric waves that deal area of effect damage. And that's just basically the gist of the weapon. Now, I created this build because I felt like when I first used it without trying to set up a build for it, it felt really weak. It felt like I wasn't getting rewarded for playing well, even if like I was dodging correctly, being able to maximize and do as much DPS. I felt like every time I activated Feast, I was just getting shitted on because I wasn't healing enough, and that hurt the most. So I came up with this build essentially to combat that and make you sort of a god with this build. Now, I'm still trying to optimize the build farther, see how far I can go by getting rid of some things, but for right now, this is the best build I could come up with. I'm going to be going over everything with you. So right here, we have the perk summary. I'm just going to go ahead from top to bottom and explain my choices. So when you got Rage Hunter, the DPS that comes from this weapon, especially when using the Feast, is already pretty good in my opinion. So I like this because you want to be doing more damage when it comes to, you know, the behemoth. You definitely want to be topping the charts, and there's plenty of ways to do this, and you can also buff this with potions, which I'm gonna go over later. So you definitely want this. I felt like this was probably the best, considering that the other ones were like ones you couldn't really maximize to its full benefit, because you get, you know, certain perks that I feel like don't really help you in a situation, especially when you have a lifesteal weapon. So this is why I went for this perk in particular. Next up is +6 toughness. Now this is the most important one in my opinion, because you get that 500 health, making you really tanky. And the most important part of this perk is the increased healing received from all sources by 50%. I'm gonna say that again, 50%. That is huge. And that's when I felt like I was being rewarded for, you know, playing good, because I was seeing a lot of health back. I could literally go from a quarter of my health and back in almost half the time I use Feast, and I'm playing well, so I felt like I was being rewarded with this. Toughness 6 is definitely a must, I feel like, if you're running this weapon, because it rewards you so much, especially if you're playing good. Etheric Attunement is +40%. This should be a +6 right here, like +5 9 lives and +6 Etheric Attunement should be +6s. I just been working on my cells, so you know those can always be buffed to +6. The only one perks that really can't be buffed up anymore would just be Knockout King and Cunning. Energized, you can pretty much swap that out for Etheric Attunement, whichever one you feel better with. So you know, Etheric Attunement, you can send out more lightning strikes with Drask Eye that do 150 damage. You know, each burst, and it shoots through the behemoth multiple times, so it'll shoot like 3 to 4 times, I believe. So that's where you get that from. So the more you attack, the more you're going to be able to dish out that constant DPS on command. So that's why I like that one a lot. The 9 lives I feel like is important, because if you're like me, you're a very aggressive player, and sometimes you do a lot of stupid stuff and you time something wrong, so you take damage for this. At least here you have a chance of, you know, not being hurt as much, giving you more time to heal up. Plus, that 20% chance to half income damage is really good. And you also get another life with this. So essentially, if you fuck up, you die, you don't get knocked down, but you get healed for 400, which isn't a lot. That's maybe like almost a quarter of your bar back. And you get empowered for 10 seconds. So you can imagine like trying to combine that with Feast, you can almost get back to full health and not too much time at all. We have the Cunning +3% just because I like the crit strikes. And I'll be going into why I take this rather than, you know, something else like a medic to help the team or anything like that. But I like this, you know, being able to crit strike in particular, because if you're hitting the right crit strikes and it comes up, it's just, you know, it's completely RNG and it comes up rightly. So you could be hitting from 700 to 1,000 damage anywhere off of these crit strikes. And I think they do happen pretty frequently from what I've used. So that's just me, but you don't have to take this. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Like I said, Energize is just weapon charge, so you want to be constantly buffing yourself for like that 6 second buff from Drask Eye, which is, you know, that 30% increased damage for 6 seconds. You'd be constantly, you know, pumping that out. And then Knockout King just comes from like the stagger damage, especially if you want to go face and, you know, try and stagger. You get a little bit extra towards that, which I think is a little bit helpful, especially when having to like knock down these behemoths so you can maximize your damage then and there. Now, before I get into like the armor and everything, I'll talk about like the strengths and weaknesses of this build and how certain things work. One of the most important things I want to bring up for people who do run this build is that it's hard to keep up stamina sometimes, especially like if you're trying to do too much, like you're always trying to sprint in order to be able to do damage, or you're always rolling out the way trying to avoid damage, whatever the case may be. I feel like, you know, these two potions right here, one being the stamina potion down below and one being the frenzy potion, because you can pop frenzy, you get a 30% extra bonus damage towards enraged behemoths on top of the rage hunter, so you'll be dishing out a lot of DPS there. And then the stamina, because it lasts 2 minutes and you gain extra stamina regen. But if you don't want to run that, you can always do something else, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Over here, you know, we got all the perks. I have Perpetual Blade Core inside Hunger because I want to keep Feast on as long as possible. That's just my opinion. You could take Reactive Hilt for this too, but you know, I like having Feast last longer. You can do this, but you have to, like, you know, dodge to be able to critical strike. That's up to you. I put Cunning in here just because I didn't want to take Reactive Hilt. Now, if you're not the best at timing and dodging, I would say take a Adhesive Hilt because you're still going to be healing for a good amount. You're just going to take damage. So if you, in the case that you do mess up, you don't get staggered and you can still constantly dish out DPS without worrying about having to stop. But again, you won't get that, like, you know, extra time inside Feast to, you know, constantly do DPS. So it's just all about, you know, what you're comfortable with and your playstyle. So for the Hunger, I put in the Rage Hunter 3 cell for the enraged damage against enraged behemoths and the increased weapon meter gain. Help, I go with Hellblade simply because it has Rage Hunter. You know, I put Cunning inside it because it has that technique one. But like I said, if you don't want to go Cunning style, I would suggest, so either you can go Eye of the Swarm or you can go Fiery Helm. And this is because they both have the mobility cells that you can put in, and you can just throw a stamina cell, or excuse me, a conditioning cell into that, and you get increased stamina just in case you don't want to take those stamina potions, because like I said, stamina is going to be a big problem, especially when using this weapon, because you have to do a lot, make sure you play aggressively, and you want to, you know, have that constant DPS, and you can't really do that if you have a beast that's running away and you got to constantly be at them. So either Eye of the Swarm, but maybe Fiery Helm might be a little bit better, because if you dodge, you do get that, you know, attack speed buff that at +3. It's 12% attack speed for 8 seconds, which isn't too bad. So, but like I said, I like Cunning over anything else. That's just my particular thing. Next up, we have the Asher's Cloak that gives you a +3 tough. And again, +9 lives can be a +3. So, you know, it's completely up to you if you have the cell or not. I'm still working on mine. But put the 9 lives into that one because it is a defense sale along with the Asher's Cloak, and you get the toughness from it. Then we have Arms of Ice. You get the Knockout King, so that's that +15%, you know, stagger damage, plus another tough cell, so that's giving you that +6 toughness cell. And then we have Dark Path, which is Shroud Feet, and it might be hard for some people to get this, but you can always switch this out. Plus, you get the Aetheric Attunement or the Energize. Like I said, you can switch out either one of those out, but that's where I get my extra 9 lives from. And I say this because more than likely, if you're farming for the Hunger, you should be like sort of doing Shroud, because you do need Shroud pieces to make the Hunger, so you should be at sort of this late game content and should have Shroud gear, so I don't feel like this should be too big of a deal. Now, one thing I will say, especially about this build, because you do have Feast and you do have that extra damage, you want to be careful about who you take this weapon against, because you're not going to be able to maximize your DPS against behemoths that run around too much. So like Embermane, who's just fucking runs around the map, if you can't stagger him, he basically just runs around forever. Obviously you wouldn't take it against Riftstalker because, you know, he's fast and he's Umbral. So you got to be careful about that. But definitely this build wrecks on super slow behemoth. So like Walmare, Charrod, ones that don't move around too much, this build shits on them completely. Especially if you have like a Perpetual Blade Core. just because you can sit there and do whatever you want and constantly attack and get that regen for feast and constantly be dropping DPS on them. So the slower, the better for the hunger, because you want to be able to use feast to its full potential. Basically all I have, that's the build. That's me explaining how everything works. And if you have any suggestions, any questions, feel free to ask. I try to answer them as much as I can, but that's about it, and that's all the time I have for today. So I do hope you lovely people enjoy the build, and if you get a chance, let me know what you think. I'm open. So that's gonna be the end of the video. I do have a repeaters build coming out that I sort of like, but it's like high risk, high reward, so do stay tuned and check in for that at a certain point. But it's your boy Where's Fluffy. Drop it under the hit, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.